Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that every decision you've ever made, every choice that felt deeply personal, every belief you've defended as uniquely yours, was never actually yours at all. Imagine realizing that the voice inside your head, the one you've trusted as the essence of who you are, has been speaking in someone else's words. Your fears. Inherited. Your ambitions. Programmed. Your sense of self. A carefully constructed illusion built by forces you never consented to, forces you've never even seen. Now pause. Feel the discomfort of that thought. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just philosophy, it's a mirror held up to the architecture of your entire existence. And once you see what's behind the glass, you can never look at your life the same way again. Today we step into the world of Aldous Huxley, a thinker who challenged society, confronted illusions, and invited humanity to see beyond the surface. And I promise you this, the final insight we will reach together is the most powerful of all. Huxley believed that much of what we call reality is simply a mental construction shaped by conditioning. He wrote extensively about how societies mold individuals through culture, education, and subtle forms of persuasion. But he also believed that every human being carries the potential to awaken, to break free from inherited patterns and perceive life with far greater clarity. So let me ask you something essential: how much of the person you are today is the result of conscious choice, and how much is the product of unconscious influences you never questioned? If you are drawn to deep philosophical reflections, psychological insights, and the search for personal growth, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment, and share this video. What we will explore ahead has the power to transform the way you understand yourself, your relationships, and the hidden forces shaping your daily life. The ideas we will unravel are not only intellectually stimulating, they are practical tools that can shift the direction of your inner journey. Aldous Huxley was fascinated by the limitations of human perception. Here's the paradox that haunted Aldous Huxley throughout his life: you believe you are free, yet nearly everything you think, feel, and desire has been carefully filtered, narrowed, and shaped by invisible hands. You believe you know reality, yet your mind shows you only a fraction of what exists, a tiny, edited version designed not to reveal truth, but to keep you functional, obedient, and asleep. You believe you are living, yet most of your days pass in a trance-like state where you react rather than respond, repeat rather than create, and survive rather than truly inhabit your own existence. Think about this for a moment. How many of your daily actions are genuinely conscious? How many of your emotional reactions are automatic responses you've repeated 1,000 times before? How many of your deepest beliefs about yourself, "I'm not good enough, I can't change, this is just who I am," are simply stories you've told yourself so many times that they've calcified into what you mistake for truth? Huxley understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding: that human beings are not born into freedom, but into a prison of perception. Your mind, magnificent as it is, functions as a reducing valve, a mechanism that takes the infinite complexity of reality and compresses it into a manageable stream of experience. But here's what terrifies us when we truly consider it: what if the reduction is too severe? What if the filter is so restrictive that you're living in a world far smaller, far less vibrant, far less real than what actually exists? Consider your own life through this lens. Every morning you wake up and step into a routine. You think certain thoughts, feel certain emotions, interact with the world in certain predictable ways. And beneath it all, there's a nagging sense, sometimes quiet, sometimes screaming, that something is missing. That despite all your achievements, all your relationships, all your experiences, you're somehow not fully alive. Not fully present. Not fully you. This feeling is not an accident. It's not a personal failing. It's the signal that you've been living according to a script you never wrote, perceiving through filters you never chose, and believing in an identity that was constructed for you before you were old enough to question it. Huxley spent decades exploring this human predicament, and what he discovered is both unsettling and liberating. He found that society doesn't control you through force, it controls you through perception. It doesn't chain your body, it narrows your consciousness. It doesn't silence your voice, it teaches you to speak in borrowed words. The most sophisticated form of control is the kind that makes you believe you're free while you're actually confined. But here's where the story becomes urgent, where the philosophical becomes intensely personal. If your perception has been narrowed, if your consciousness has been filtered, if your identity has been constructed rather than discovered, then who are you, really? Beneath the conditioning, beneath the stories, beneath the automatic patterns and inherited beliefs, what remains? And more importantly, what becomes possible when you learn to see through the filters? What kind of life awaits on the other side of your own illusions? These are not abstract questions. They are the questions that determine whether you will spend your existence as a passenger in your own life or as the conscious creator of it. They are the questions that separate those who merely survive from those who truly live. They are the questions that, once asked with genuine courage, can never be unasked. The journey we're about to take together is not comfortable. It will challenge everything you've assumed about yourself, about reality, about the nature of human existence. But if you're willing to look directly at what Huxley discovered, if you're willing to examine the invisible architecture shaping your daily life, something extraordinary happens. The prison doors don't just open. You realize they were never locked at all. So I'm asking you now, are you ready to see? Are you ready to discover what lies beneath the surface of your own consciousness? Are you ready to learn what one of the sharpest minds of the 20th century understood about the hidden forces that have been shaping your reality since the day you were born? Because what comes next isn't just information. It's a revelation that will force you to reconsider everything you thought you knew about what it means to be human. Drawing from psychology and neuroscience, Huxley argued that the human mind filters reality to prevent overload. But the deeper truth he uncovered is far more unsettling. This filtering mechanism doesn't just protect you, it imprisons you. The psychologist William James suggested that consciousness is capable of receiving far more information than we normally access, and Huxley built upon this by proposing that society deliberately narrows our perception to maintain order, predictability, and control. Think about what this means. Your brain is not showing you reality, it's showing you a curated version of reality, one that has been shaped by evolutionary pressures, cultural conditioning, and psychological defense mechanisms you inherited before you could speak. The philosopher Henri Bergson described this perfectly. Perception is not designed to reveal truth, but to help you survive. Your mind spotlights only what fits your internal models, and everything else, the vast majority of existence, simply disappears from your awareness. But here's the hidden problem, the one that most people never recognize. What happens when those internal models are built on fear, trauma, and inherited beliefs that were never yours to begin with? What happens when the filters meant to protect you become the very things that suffocate your potential? This is where human suffering truly originates. Not from life itself, but from the stories your mind tells in response to life. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You are not choosing your reactions, ancient patterns buried deep in your psyche are choosing for you. You are not creating your reality, you are replaying scripts written by parents, teachers, society, and every painful moment you never fully processed. Consider how this operates in your daily existence. A colleague criticizes your work, and instantly your mind constructs a narrative, I'm not good enough. I never get it right. This always happens to me. But pause, are these objective facts, or are they meaning-making strategies formed over years of repetition? The criticism itself is neutral, just words in the air. The suffering comes entirely from the interpretation, from the filter through which you perceive it. Huxley recognized that most people mistake their inherited conditioning for identity. They believe the voice of self-doubt is their authentic self. They believe their automatic emotional reactions are who they really are. They believe the limitations they feel are actual boundaries rather than psychological constructs that can be dismantled. This is the great illusion, confusing the prison for the prisoner. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this same pattern when he spoke of the herd mentality, the way individuals absorb the values, fears, and beliefs of the collective without question. Arthur Schopenhauer described it as the will that drives human behavior beneath conscious awareness, an unconscious force that most people obey their entire lives without ever recognizing its existence. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps, discovered that even in the most brutal circumstances, human beings retain one final freedom, the freedom to choose the meaning they assign to their experiences. But here's what makes this problem so insidious, so difficult to escape: modern society has become extraordinarily skilled at keeping you distracted from this inner awakening. Huxley predicted this decades before it became our reality. He warned that the future would not silence individuals through oppression, but seduce them with noise, comfort, entertainment, and constant stimulation that numbs the desire to ask deeper questions. Look at your own life through this lens. How often do you reach the end of the day feeling mentally drained but not truly fulfilled? How often are you pulled in 1,000 directions, notifications, responsibilities, expectations, an endless stream of information demanding your attention? This is not accidental. When you lose control of your attention, you lose control of your life. When your consciousness is constantly scattered, you cannot observe the patterns running beneath the surface. When you are always distracted, you cannot question the filters shaping your perception. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to be free, that we carry the weight of creating our own meaning in a universe that offers none. But most people avoid this freedom because it comes with responsibility, with the terror of facing the void and choosing anyway. It's easier to live according to inherited scripts, to blame circumstances, to believe that who you are is fixed and unchangeable. This is the hidden problem at the core of human existence: you possess the capacity for radical freedom, but you've been conditioned to fear it. You have the ability to perceive reality with clarity, but you've been taught to accept the narrow version your mind provides. You carry the potential for awakening, but the entire structure of modern life is designed to keep you asleep. The consequences of living through these invisible filters are far more devastating than most people realize. They are not dramatic or obvious, they are silent, gradual, and cumulative. They shape every relationship you enter, every decision you make, every dream you abandon before it fully forms. And the most terrifying part is this: you cannot see the cage while you're inside it. Consider what happens when your perception is chronically narrowed. You begin to mistake your mental map for the actual territory. Cognitive psychologists call this confirmation bias, the tendency to seek information that confirms what you already believe while ignoring everything that contradicts it. Your mind becomes an echo chamber, reinforcing the same patterns, the same fears, the same limitations over and over again. You think you're perceiving reality, but you're actually perceiving your beliefs about reality. And those beliefs harden into invisible walls that define the boundaries of your entire existence. Huxley understood that this creates a profound form of self-imprisonment. You stop asking questions because you believe you already know the answers. You stop exploring new possibilities because you've convinced yourself of what's possible and what's not. You stop growing because growth requires venturing into unknown territory, and your filtered perception has taught you that the unknown is dangerous, that uncertainty is threatening, that change is something to be avoided rather than embraced. Now observe how this operates in your relationships. When you meet someone, you don't actually see them, you see your projection of them, filtered through your past experiences, your expectations, your fears. If you've been hurt before, your mind automatically searches for signs of betrayal. If you've been abandoned, you perceive distance even when none exists. If you've learned that vulnerability equals weakness, you construct walls and call them boundaries. The other person becomes a character in your inner narrative rather than a human being in their own right. This is what modern neuroscience reveals: your brain is not a passive recorder of experience but an active constructor of reality. It fills in gaps, makes assumptions, and creates coherent stories from incomplete information. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman demonstrated that human beings operate through two systems, one fast and automatic, one slow and deliberate, and the vast majority of your life is governed by the automatic system, the one running beneath conscious awareness, the one shaped by every unexamined belief you carry. But the consequences extend far beyond personal relationships. They shape entire societies. When millions of individuals operate through narrowed perception, when entire populations accept filtered reality as truth, the collective consciousness contracts. Critical thinking diminishes. Empathy weakens. People become easier to manipulate, easier to control, easier to direct toward predetermined outcomes. Huxley saw this clearly in his observations of propaganda, advertising, and mass media, all systems designed to exploit the reducing valve, to narrow perception even further, to keep individuals in a permanent state of reactivity rather than reflection. Think about the emotional toll of living this way. You experience recurring patterns but cannot understand why they keep repeating. You feel trapped by circumstances but cannot see how your own perception is creating those circumstances. You want to change but find yourself paralyzed by invisible forces you cannot name. This is what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that your actions don't matter, that you're powerless, that life is simply happening to you rather than through you. And here's the most insidious consequence of all, you become a stranger to yourself. The real you, the consciousness observing all these patterns, the awareness beneath the stories, the potential waiting to be expressed, gets buried under layers of conditioning so thick that you forget it exists. You identify completely with your thoughts, your emotions, your automatic reactions. You believe the voice in your head is who you are. You confuse the filter for the light passing through it. Huxley warned that when individuals lose touch with their inner world, they lose their humanity. They become mechanical, predictable, empty. They chase external validation because they've lost connection with internal truth. They accumulate possessions, achievements, and experiences, hoping these will fill the void, never realizing that the void exists precisely because they've abandoned the one place where meaning can actually be found, within their own consciousness. This is why so many people feel a deep, persistent sense of meaninglessness despite material comfort. This is why anxiety and depression have become epidemic despite unprecedented access to entertainment and distraction. This is why relationships feel shallow, work feels empty, and life feels like going through motions rather than genuinely living. The filtered perception that was meant to protect you has become a barrier between you and reality itself. Here is where everything shifts. Here is where Huxley's insights become not just philosophical contemplation but practical revolution. Because the moment you recognize that your perception has been filtered, that your identity has been constructed, that your consciousness has been narrowed, in that very moment, the filters begin to lose their power. Awareness itself is the antidote to unconscious living. But let's be clear, this is not about adding more knowledge to your mind. This is about fundamentally changing your relationship with your own consciousness. It requires something most people spend their entire lives avoiding, the willingness to observe yourself without judgment, to question everything you've assumed to be true, and to sit with the discomfort of not knowing who you are beneath the layers of conditioning. Huxley believed that true freedom begins with attention. Not attention directed outward at the endless stream of tasks and distractions, but attention directed inward at the mechanism of your own mind. When you begin to observe your thoughts rather than being controlled by them, something extraordinary happens. You create space between stimulus and response. You realize that thoughts are not facts, they are mental events arising and passing away. You discover that emotions are not your identity, they are temporary states moving through you. This is what the philosopher Alan Watts meant when he described the self as a process rather than an object. You are not a fixed thing to be discovered but a dynamic unfolding to be experienced. And the spiritual teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti emphasized this same insight, that freedom begins when you observe yourself without the filter of past knowledge, without the need to judge, compare, or control what you find. So how do you actually practice this? Start with the simplest and most radical act, pause. Before you react to the next trigger, pause. Before you speak from habit, pause. Before you believe the next fearful thought, pause. In that pause lives the possibility of consciousness. In that gap between stimulus and automatic response, you reclaim your freedom. Imagine entering a conflict with someone you love. Your automatic pattern might be to defend, to attack, or to withdraw. But what if, in that moment, you asked yourself, what part of me is being triggered right now? What old wound is speaking? What belief about myself is being challenged? Suddenly, the conflict transforms from a battle into a mirror. The other person is no longer the enemy, they're revealing something within you that needs attention, understanding, healing. This is the rebellion Huxley spoke of, not a rebellion against external authority, but a rebellion against the tyranny of your own unconscious patterns. It's the refusal to keep living on autopilot. It's the commitment to wake up again and again, moment by moment, to the reality of your own consciousness. History offers us powerful examples of those who embodied this awakening. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in concentration camps, discovered that even when everything external is stripped away, human beings retain the freedom to choose their response, to create meaning from suffering, to maintain dignity in the face of absolute horror. His liberation didn't come when the camps were liberated, it came when he recognized his inner freedom could not be taken from him. The Buddha's entire teaching centers on this same insight, that suffering is caused not by life's circumstances but by the mind's relationship to those circumstances. When you cling to pleasure, you create suffering. When you resist pain, you create suffering. When you identify with the temporary as if it were permanent, you create suffering. The path to liberation is learning to observe all of it, pleasure, pain, thought, emotion, without being enslaved by any of it. But Huxley also emphasized something crucial: this awakening must be grounded in compassion, both for yourself and others. Without compassion, self-observation becomes self-criticism. Without compassion, awareness becomes another tool for judgment. The psychologist Kristen Neff has demonstrated through research that self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend, increases motivation, resilience, and emotional well-being far more than self-criticism ever could. So as you begin to observe the patterns running beneath your conscious awareness, do so with gentleness. When you notice yourself repeating an old fear, don't condemn yourself, get curious. When you catch yourself believing a limiting story, don't fight it, investigate it. Ask, where did this story come from? Who taught me to think this way? Is this belief actually true, or is it just familiar? This is how you reclaim your consciousness, by becoming a compassionate witness to your own inner world. By recognizing that every emotion carries information, every fear reveals a boundary, every limiting belief points to an area ready for expansion. You stop being a passive victim of your conditioning and become an active participant in your own evolution. The rebellion is not loud or dramatic. It happens in quiet moments of awareness. It happens when you choose presence over distraction. It happens when you respond from consciousness rather than react from habit. It happens when you look at your life and ask, am I truly living, or am I simply surviving according to someone else's script? After exploring perception, identity, suffering, and the path to awakening, we arrive at the most profound truth Aldous Huxley spent his entire life trying to communicate, a truth so simple it's almost always overlooked, yet so powerful it can restructure everything you understand about existence itself. The truth is this: the quality of your consciousness determines the quality of your life. Not your circumstances. Not your past. Not your achievements or failures. Your consciousness, the way you perceive, interpret, and make meaning of the world, is the foundation upon which your entire reality is built. Let that settle for a moment. Because what this means is both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. It means that two people can experience the exact same event and live in completely different worlds based solely on how they perceive it. It means that the prison you feel trapped in is not made of external walls but of internal interpretations. It means that the life you're living right now is not the only life available to you, it's simply the life your current level of consciousness can perceive. Huxley returned to this insight again and again: the purpose of life is to wake up. Not to accumulate more possessions, not to achieve more success, not to be validated by others, but to expand your awareness until you recognize that you are far more than your thoughts, far more than your beliefs, far more than the identity you've constructed or inherited. Awakening means stepping beyond the reducing valve of the mind and seeing reality with greater clarity, depth, and compassion. Think about what this means for your everyday experience. Every emotion you feel is not just a reaction, it's a signal pointing towards something within you that needs attention. Every conflict you face is not just a problem, it's a mirror revealing an aspect of yourself you haven't fully understood. Every desire you experience is not just a longing, it's a direction pointing towards something meaningful trying to emerge through you. When you wake up to this, life stops being a series of random events happening to you and becomes a continuous conversation with your own consciousness. But here's what makes this realization revolutionary: it means that nothing needs to change externally for your life to transform completely. You don't need to wait for better circumstances. You don't need to become someone different. You don't need to fix everything that feels broken. What needs to happen is a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own experience, and that shift is available to you right now, in this very moment. Huxley often warned that the greatest danger in life is not pain or difficulty, it's unconsciousness. A person can endure tremendous hardship and still grow, still find meaning, still discover depth. But a person who moves through life unaware, operating on autopilot, reacting from conditioning rather than responding from consciousness, that person cannot truly live. They exist, but they do not inhabit their existence. They breathe, but they are not fully alive. Consider how many moments of your life have passed without your full presence. How many conversations where your mind was elsewhere. How many experiences that slipped through your fingers because you were lost in thought about the past or anxious about the future. How many opportunities for connection, for joy, for genuine aliveness that vanished because you were not awake enough to receive them. This is what awakening reclaims, your life itself. Not some future version of your life after you've achieved everything or fixed everything, but this life, right now, in all its imperfect, messy, beautiful complexity. When you bring full consciousness to even the most ordinary moment, drinking coffee, walking down the street, having a conversation, that moment becomes extraordinary. Not because it changes, but because you are finally present enough to experience it. The philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of authentic existence versus inauthentic existence. Inauthentic existence is living according to the they, what they say, what they expect, what they believe. Authentic existence is taking full responsibility for your own being, making conscious choices aligned with your deepest values rather than unconscious reactions shaped by conditioning. And Huxley would add, authentic existence requires awareness of the filters through which you're perceiving, the willingness to question those filters, and the courage to expand beyond them. Now here's where this becomes intensely practical. When you understand that consciousness determines reality, you realize that every moment offers a choice. You can react from the past, from old wounds, inherited beliefs, automatic patterns, or you can respond from the present, from awareness, from curiosity, from the person you're becoming rather than the person you've been. This choice exists in every interaction, every decision, every thought that crosses your mind. Imagine what your relationships would look like if you approached them with this level of consciousness. Instead of projecting your fears onto others, you'd see them as they actually are. Instead of repeating old patterns of conflict, you'd recognize the triggers and choose a different response. Instead of seeking validation from outside yourself, you'd offer presence, understanding, genuine connection. The relationship doesn't need to become perfect, you simply need to become awake within it. Imagine what your work would feel like if you brought full consciousness to it. Not working to escape boredom or prove your worth, but working as an expression of something meaningful within you. Not driven by external pressure but by internal clarity about what matters. The work itself might not change, but your experience of it transforms completely when consciousness shifts. And imagine what your sense of purpose would become if you stopped seeking meaning in external achievements and started recognizing meaning as something you create through awareness. Viktor Frankl discovered this truth in the most brutal circumstances imaginable, that human beings always retain the freedom to choose the meaning they assign to their experiences. You cannot always control what happens, but you can always choose how you relate to what happens. And in that choice lives your power, your freedom, your humanity. Huxley believed that as consciousness expands, something profound occurs. You begin to perceive yourself not as a separate, isolated individual but as an expression of something larger. Boundaries soften. Compassion deepens. The artificial divisions between self and other begin to dissolve. You recognize that the consciousness looking through your eyes is the same consciousness looking through every pair of eyes, just filtered through different lenses, shaped by different experiences, expressing through different forms. This is not abstract mysticism. This is what happens when awareness expands beyond the ego's narrow concerns. You stop taking everything so personally because you recognize that most of what people do is a reflection of their own consciousness, not a judgment of your worth. You stop defending your identity so fiercely because you recognize that identity is fluid, not fixed. You stop resisting life because you understand that resistance creates suffering while acceptance creates space for wisdom. But let's be absolutely clear about what awakening is not. It's not about reaching some permanent state of bliss where you never feel pain or struggle. It's not about transcending your humanity or becoming spiritually superior to others. It's not about escaping life or denying emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. Awakening is about being fully human, feeling everything, experiencing everything, but no longer being enslaved by any of it. It's about remaining conscious even in the midst of difficulty, present even in the midst of chaos, compassionate even in the midst of pain. Aldous Huxley once wrote that experience is not what happens to a person, but what a person does with what happens to them. This is the essence of everything we've explored. Your life, your actual lived experience, is shaped not by events but by the consciousness you bring to those events. Two people can face the same loss and one finds meaning while the other finds only bitterness. Two people can have the same opportunity and one sees possibility while the other sees danger. The difference is not in what happens, but in the awareness observing what happens. So here we are, at the culmination of this journey. And the most powerful realization is this: your life expands in direct proportion to your willingness to perceive it clearly. When you dare to look deeply, at yourself, at your patterns, at your conditioning, at the filters shaping your perception, you unlock something extraordinary. You step into a richer, more conscious, more authentic existence. You begin to live not by default but by design. Not according to inherited scripts but according to conscious choice. The prison doors were never locked. The limitations were never as solid as they seemed. The life you've been seeking has been here all along, waiting for you to become aware enough to recognize it. Huxley dedicated his life to showing humanity this truth, that we are far more than we think we are, that reality is far richer than our filtered perception reveals, and that the greatest journey we can take is the journey into our own consciousness. So the question that remains, the only question that has ever truly mattered, is this: will you wake up to your own life? Will you bring consciousness to this moment, and the next, and the one after that? Will you dare to see beyond the filters, to question the stories, to expand the boundaries of your awareness? Because on the other side of that willingness lives a version of existence you cannot imagine from where you currently stand. A life where presence replaces distraction. Where clarity replaces confusion. Where consciousness replaces conditioning. Where you are finally, fully, undeniably alive. This is what Aldous Huxley understood. This is what he spent his life trying to communicate. And this is what becomes possible the moment you choose awareness over unconsciousness, presence over absence, awakening over sleep. The journey doesn't end here. It begins here. Every moment is an invitation to wake up. Every breath is an opportunity to be more conscious. Every experience is a chance to perceive more clearly, to respond more wisely, to live more fully. May you walk forward from this moment with greater clarity, deeper awareness, and the understanding that the most meaningful journey you will ever take is the journey into yourself. Because there, beneath all the conditioning and stories and filters, you will discover what you've been searching for all along, the truth of who you actually are when you finally dare to look.